Per reports, the Pittsburgh Steelers are in the trade market to add a playmaker next to DK Metcalf. Whether it's a wide receiver, whether it's a tight end, the Steelers are shopping, and it looks like they're interested in multiple players. So this is your trade update, but first, before I get into who the players are, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn notifications for everything Pittsburgh Steelers news and updates. Also, like this video. Now, let's get right back into it. So, the Pittsburgh Steelers are interested in Dolphins tight end Jonnu Smith, someone who just put up a monster season and career year this past year with the Miami Dolphins. And also, they are interested in Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receiver Trey Palmer, someone who doesn't have much production, but someone who can be elite in the right situation. So, those are the two players that we know for sure the Pittsburgh Steelers have contacted their teams to try to trade for, per reports. Also in the rumors, there is a player out there who the Pittsburgh Steelers haven't contacted their team, but many people suspect will be traded because right now he's in an uncomfortable situation with his team, hasn't been given an opportunity. He's a former top 10 draft pick, and people suspect the Steelers will have interest. And his name is Kyle Pitts, tight end of the Atlanta Falcons. So, let's start off with Miami Dolphins tight end Jonnu Smith, because the top insider in the entire NFL, Adam Schefter, reported, someone who breaks all the trades for ESPN and has an inside scoop, said that the Dolphins have had trade discussions with the Pittsburgh Steelers about their lone Pro Bowl selection last season, tight end Jonnu Smith, and that those talks came after Smith expressed an interest in reworking his deal that is scheduled to pay him $4.8 million this next season. So, with Smith seeking a new contract, Miami has sought a trade partner. Last season, Smith, he set the franchise record for tight end receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns with the Dolphins, and Smith's preference per league source is to stay in Miami, but Miami is looking for a trade partner and that the Pittsburgh Steelers have called. So that's the report. And it's interesting because when you look at Jonnu Smith, he was a player that was with the Tennessee Titans when Arthur Smith was the offensive coordinator there. And then when Arthur Smith went to the Atlanta Falcons as the head coach, guess who else was on the team? Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith was a tight end on the Atlanta Falcons with Arthur Smith. And now that Arthur Smith is with the Pittsburgh Steelers, the Steelers have called the Falcons in to gauge the interest in Jonnu Smith and to see if they could trade for him once again. So it seems like this is an Arthur Smith type of move and that he really likes Jonnu Smith as a tight end and player on his team, and that this is an actual trade that can happen. But when you look at this trade from a Steelers perspective, it just really doesn't make sense. He's a player who turns 30 in August, and even though he has deep ties to Arthur Smith, the Steelers have a bunch of tight ends on the roster right now who barely get used, who can be capable of stepping into a bigger role, like Darnell Washington. Darnell Washington barely gets any targets, and he's a player who can do good given the right situation. The Steelers also have Pat Freiermuth, who barely gets targets as the top tight end. So what's the point of adding another tight end to the roster if you're barely going to use them? So this trade just wouldn't make sense, but the Pittsburgh Steelers apparently are interested. So me personally, I wouldn't do it, but the Steelers, they look like they might. But who knows? It's up to the Miami Dolphins. Maybe this is just a leverage situation from the Dolphins in terms of, hey, if you don't sign to what we want to sign you for, we're going to trade you away. So might as well just sign that contract and get extended for what we want to pay you. So, Arthur Smith, Jonnu Smith, that's a pairing that once again could happen, this time in Pittsburgh, because the Steelers apparently have called the Dolphins to try to trade for him. Anyway, that's the trade update there. That's the report. But now let's move on to the next player the Pittsburgh Steelers have called a team about. Because apparently they've called the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to try to trade for speedy wide receiver Trey Palmer. Now, before I get into the report, let me just say this one isn't as credible as ESPN Adam Schefter reporting it, but this is someone who reported the Steelers' entire schedule release before it even came out, a day before. And Zachary Smith of Steelers Now reported, saying the Steelers have checked in with the Buccaneers, calling them in regard to wide receiver Trey Palmer. So, Trey Palmer, he's a player who was a 6th round pick in 2023 and has 51 catches, 557 yards, and 4 touchdowns in his career. The Steelers are continuing to seek pass catching for their offense after trading away George Pickens, and after it was reported on Thursday that the Pittsburgh Steelers are interested in Miami Dolphins tight end Jonnu Smith, Steelers Now was able to confirm the Steelers' interest in another wide receiver has been Trey Palmer, calling Tampa Buccaneers for him. So, the Steelers are in need of a wide receiver, and it looks like the Tampa Buccaneers are trying to get rid of some of theirs, because they already drafted some guys in this year's draft in terms of a first-round talent. They added Chris Godwin in free agency, or re-signed him, They also have Mike Evans on their team. They have Jalen McMillan on their team from the 2024 draft. So they have a lot of playmakers, and now it looks like they're trying to get rid of one. And Trey Palmer may be the odd guy out. So the Pittsburgh Steelers are in need of a player at that position, and he may be a pick the Pittsburgh Steelers decide to give away and add to their roster. So Trey Palmer, that's a player the Pittsburgh Steelers have apparently called about. And that's the update there. Me personally, would I like this trade? Well, it depends what the Steelers would give away. If they give away a 6th round or 7th round draft pick, sure. But if they're giving away any pick upwards than that, then no. Because the Pittsburgh Steelers already have players on their roster who are better than Trey Palmer, who you want to see given more opportunities than Trey Palmer. So you have Kelvin Austin stepping into his own. You have Roman Wilson, who is a 3rd round pick. You have other players on this roster who deserve an opportunity. And adding Trey Palmer, if he's not a top level superstar or going to be the number 2 receiver on this team, I just don't see a reason in giving away trade assets or draft capital for a player of that caliber. It just doesn't make sense. So that addition or that trade call for Trey Palmer, it just doesn't make sense. I don't really like it, but the Steelers are going to do what the Steelers are going to do. Now, let's move over to a rumor. This one is just completely a rumor. No report there, but it looks like Kyle Pitts, he is uncomfortable in his situation with Atlanta Falcons. Probably has been uncomfortable for a while now. He just hasn't worked out there. He was like a top 5, top 10 draft pick with Atlanta Falcons as a tight end. They've seen him more as just a tight end, as a receiver as well, but he just hasn't worked out. He hasn't been given the opportunity year after year, and with the new head coach last season, he still wasn't given the opportunity. So many people suspect that he may be traded, and he may be the odd guy out there. And people have linked him to the Pittsburgh Steelers once again, because Arthur Smith, it was his head coach with the Atlanta Falcons, and it seems like Arthur Smith likes having connections with players and likes bringing in his former players to his current team. He did so with Scotty Miller. He did so with Van Jefferson last season, having him as basically the number 2 receiver, even though he was like the number 4 or 5 receiver on his previous team. He's trying to do it with Jonnu Smith. He has done it with Jonnu Smith multiple times. So you could just see the list of players that Arthur Smith has brought back from players he used to coach. And many people suspect that Kyle Pitts may be one of them. And when looking at this situation, this was one I like a little bit more because Kyle Pitts can be more. He was a top 5 draft pick. He is someone who hasn't been given the opportunity and may be given an opportunity in Pittsburgh. And if he is, he may be able to succeed and be that top superstar that we all expect him to be coming out of the draft. So this is something I like a little bit more than those other 2 trades. And he's way younger than Jonnu Smith. And if he's brought to the team, he can be utilized as a tight end. He can be utilized as a wide receiver. He can be utilized in different scenarios. It just depends what you would have to give up for him. It probably won't be a lot, but this is one I like a little bit better if it were to happen. than the other two. But even then, me personally, I'm not here for having 7 tight ends on the roster when you barely have 5 capable guys. That's just my thoughts on this. The Steelers are looking to add so many tight ends. They got rid of a wide receiver. They didn't get rid of tight ends. They got rid of a wide receiver this offseason. So you got to fill the wide receiver spot, not the tight end spot. You already have 4 tight ends who are capable. So you don't need 5. But you do need 5 capable wide receivers. With that being said, however, let's end this video. That's your trade update for the Pittsburgh Steelers this offseason. So basically, they've called the Tampa Buccaneers for Trey Palmer, and they called the Miami Dolphins for Jonnu Smith. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Do you want the Steelers to trade for any of those people? And what would you give up in terms of draft capital? Also, what are your thoughts on the rumors surrounding Kyle Pitts and maybe linking him to the Pittsburgh Steelers? Would you want him? Let me know your thoughts. And just in general, what playmaker would you want the Steelers to add in terms of anyone out there who's maybe available in the trade market or still in free agency? Who would you want the Steelers to add at the wide receiver position? Also, make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn notifications for everything Pittsburgh Steelers news, updates, highlights, analysis, reports. Everything surrounding this team, I've covered it. I'll continue to cover it. This is the best spot for Pittsburgh Steelers football. So, until the next video, I'll see you guys all later. I'm out. Peace.